Well, for those of you who were interested in coming together on Good Friday, this is one of the traditions that we have during Holy Week. It's a chance for us to simply gather together and do some collective remembering, particularly about the way in which Jesus lived his life, and the way tonight we recall the way in which it came to simply a brutal end under the power of Rome, and the way Rome had co-opted the religion of Jesus' day. And so tonight, I'm gonna, before we get going and people start to join, I just want to walk you through a little bit of the symbolism that's present for us tonight and what the journey is going to be for the next maybe 20 or 30 minutes together. So let me do some of that this evening. You can see before us, it's one of the few times that we really bring the cross so tangibly close to us, right? We draw ourselves close to this cross, even though it was used by Rome to crucify so many people. Because Jesus' life ends on this cross, it's sort of a way for us to reconnect to that moment. So the cross is prevalent in tonight's experience, and it is under a white fabric as a reminder that after Jesus died, he was wrapped in that white linen cloth, and that was all that remained come Easter morning in the tomb. So a reconnection to the cloth that is remaining after Jesus is crucified and put into the tomb. So that's what the fabric is for. And then, of course, we have stones, and I've invited you as well, if you'd like to have a stone with you tonight. Kind of reminder of the weight of the world that and the weight of dis-ease that's part of Jesus' experience, and how that is what literally brings him down, that he carries that weight in this experience so tragically. And by the time tonight's over, just a reminder of what do we do with the heaviness of all of that? What do we do with that? And then lastly, the candles tonight, simply a way in which we will remember together the vibrancy of Jesus' life. What were some of the key things that Jesus taught, the way in which he lived his life that might continue to be a part of who we are? So that'll be the journey this evening that we take as we gather together this evening. As you can tell, this is an experiment in technology, so I'm a little anxious about it. I'm not going to always be in front of the camera tonight to do some of the reflective pieces. I'm going to walk out of the frame, and some aspect of this kind of centering piece will be available for you to pay attention to as you hear the words. So I can't predict what the camera will do, but hopefully it holds enough of it so that this is an emerging journey as you move through this experience with us. So let me just talk for a minute about kind of the weight of this evening. You know, I don't know if you listen to the PBS NewsHour, but that's what Lori and I often do before we eat dinner. And tonight, just this kind of the weight of the new numbers of deaths in relationship to the dis-ease that is gripped the world, right? Over 100,000 people have lost their lives to this disease. And it seems strange on a night like that to pause and remember the death of one person so long ago. But I think it's important to remember that in Jesus' time, he wrestled with the same kind of dis-ease that we're experiencing. Because it wasn't just simply a physical illness. That's not the only thing that was going on. But rather, it revealed more and more social dis-ease, right? The breakdown of society, the things that were broken, the things that were wrong with the world that needed to turn around. That's why all this talk of redemption and change and transformation and reform. Jesus was a part of all that movement, clearly, and understood that the dis-ease was not simply illness, but it was all these systems that were weighing heavy on people that ultimately, as you interacted with them, sometimes they would draw your last breath from you and rob you of your life. Over 100,000 people now have wrestled in one way or another with the disease that holds our planet. And so we need to be aware of that tonight. Maybe some of you have lost neighbors or friends or relatives or even somebody in your immediate family. We all probably would be touched by this in some way, shape, or form. This last week for me, I heard of the news of John Prine. He's one of my favorite bluegrass country music singers, and I've loved to listen to him over the years. And there was something about his death, succumbing to the coronavirus, that really hit me hard. And it just felt so close. And I know that that's going to happen to a lot of us. And I found myself, when I heard of John's passing, streaming his music constantly. Even today, when I was working in the garage today, I had John Prine music playing for the third or fourth day in a row. Why am I doing that? I'm doing it because I want to hold on to the beauty of his life in a way that just sinks into my bones a little bit. To remember the vibrancy of his music, the way he could bring lyrics together, the wonder he brought to life through his music. And that's kind of what we're doing here tonight. You know, when we lose somebody that we love and somebody who shared a bit of love with the world, it does us all good to try to hold them a little bit more closely. Let them linger within us as long as we can. So tonight, through some reflective readings, and maybe for you, reflecting on what's going on for you as you manage the dis-ease we're all mixed up in, reflecting maybe on the life of Jesus and how that came to an end and yet didn't. All of that you can reflect on this evening. So with that, I'm going to invite you into this experience. I'll begin with a brief reading of things that we begin to collectively remember about the life and the way in which Jesus longed for a new way that we might live together. So I invite you to take a deep breath and just be present. Maybe let the scene in front of you kind of hold your attention for our time together tonight. Collectively tonight, you and I try to remember. We remember about one who dreamed of, what might be. That people might be kind of set free from ideas and images about God that enslaved them to the rulers of the day, even to the norms of the day. Somebody who taught that through just simply everyday acts of human kindness one to another, we are drawn intimately into a connection with each other, with the world, with the planet, and really with the sacred. That was somebody that we remember tonight. Someone who had a dream that we might collectively share. It is that one that we remember tonight. Tonight we remember one who had simply moments of breakthrough, the kind of breakthroughs that we all long to have. For Jesus particularly, he had these moments that allowed him to dream of a kind of a loving kingdom, a kingdom or a kingdom that was somehow coming to life. He felt it in his bones. He experienced it in his relationships with others, with people on the margins. And people really listened and began to respond to him. Clearly, men and women and children, they begin to walk with him and to begin to live into that vision. This was a dream, I think, that stirred the hearts of just common folks. And they could imagine a new way of being together, a new way of being in relationship with one another, a new way of being connected to the sacred. Jesus, for them, embodied that deep and abiding relationship. And so tonight, we remember that he brought that gift to our world. Tonight we recall when Jesus probably learned of the cruel death of his cousin, John the Baptist. Probably in some ways, Jesus knew what he was getting into, that the way of life that he was advocating would run headlong into powers that simply refused to let those voices be heard. John the Baptist, of course, suffered that fate. Jesus, too, would suffer the same fate. But when he heard about John the Baptist, he ended up getting in a boat. And maybe this is a good practice for all of us. He sought this kind of lonely place where he could be just alone for a while, to breathe quietly, and maybe there to kind of calm the feelings of powerlessness, feelings of frustration. I'm not sure what he prayed about that night, but in the biblical story, it tells us that he went out and he prayed. But rather than running from what he thought was his way of articulating or living into this kingdom, he moved forward. He leaned into this gift of life that he was trying to give shape to. And I think for us, that is a great lesson to be learned. You and I, facing all that's around us, will we withdraw only to disappear from the world, or will we continue to find ways to lean into life with all that we can, despite the circumstances? For Jesus, he knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he wouldn't retreat into isolation. He would not retreat into safety. Truly a challenge for us all. How do we, in times like this, not lean back in fear, but continue to lean in? Remembering the life of Jesus maybe gives us some strength to continue that journey in our time. Clearly, there were moments in the life of Jesus when he felt like his dreams were maybe shattered. Maybe his vision was going to end with his life and not catch on or inspire others. And he would break down and literally just cry over what could have been. He knew kind of the pain of failure and powerlessness, of confrontation. He must have felt it in his bones. Jesus was probably one who felt, broken. He felt alone. And obviously, he felt abandoned from time to time, even by his closest friends. For some reason, Jesus captures for us what it means to be human, to not only experience joy and delight, passion and pleasure, but the pain of sorrow and suffering, of loss. And yet to somehow integrate all of that and to see it all as a gift that can move us deeper and deeper into the experience of life itself. Tonight we remember one who lived the complexity of life as a gift. As Jesus got closer and closer to Jerusalem, as he knew he would begin to possibly confront those who could have power over him, I suppose that he thought this could be the end. And in that moment, he gathered his friends. Maybe he thought it would be the last time that they would get together. And there they shared what we now know as a simple meal, a meal that kind of reflected, if you will, the spirit of this kingdom that Jesus was thinking about, this kingdom that he could imagine, that he tried so hard to help others imitate. And so they gathered at a common table. And there they broke bread and they drank wine. And that tradition has carried on through generation after generation. An open table, where all are invited to share. An amazing image of what it means to be one people connected together. That image of an open table where all can share is an image that continues today in churches around the world, in the breaking of bread and wine and coming together to commune together around that meal. Maybe this act of open table, this act of communing together, Jesus could imagine would be an embodiment of the idea of kingdom that he was striving for. You and I, too, are invited in many ways to experience that same kind of communion. I think in these days, we can experience it by communing with nature. We can experience it by gathering in churches around bread that is blessed or wine that is blessed, in the communion of saints in a sanctuary week after week. We can experience it with the relationships we have with family and friends. Especially now in times of isolation, we know how important the sense of community can be. Can we find something sacred in the way in which we gather together? Tonight, we remember one who clearly did. Finally, tonight, we remember that as his life began to dim, Jesus lost his life by being crucified in a cross. The light that he shared with all of us on that night would clearly go out. In some ways, we hold the silence of that moment when Jesus breathed his last breath. Tonight, we recall by the lighting of the last candle that moment in time. I invite you to just take a few breaths and allow the cross and the candles and the stones and the fabric to remind you again of the vibrancy of Jesus' life and the way it all came to an end. Or does it? In many ways, the vibrancy of his teachings, the joy of his life, ultimately is for us now to carry. Right? Each of us, in some way, invited to participate in the vision of kingdom and community that Jesus brought to life in the way in which he lived and interacted with others. So in the darkness of this space, we're reminded that all of us are invited to carry that light deep inside of us. And in some ways, just like I listened to John Prine's music over and over again in the last few days, we listen and are attentive to the way in which Jesus, now the one we call the Christ, lived his life so that his song might go on inside of us, that we might be that body that continues to manifest that great kingdom of love, kindness, compassion, tenderness, care for self, for others, for world. Tonight, we do good to remember and to hold the story close. And finally, I invite you, if you have a stone tonight, to let that stone kind of remind you of the weight of dis-ease. My guess is you're feeling it, I'm feeling it, the heaviness of it all. Knowing now that we will be in isolation for maybe a little bit longer, how will we hold up under the weight of all this? The beauty of this moment is that when we wonder what is it that needs to be lifted from us, laying the stones on the cross is a symbolic way of saying, maybe it's time to let go of the things that are causing so much disease in our own personal lives, in our lives of relationships, or our family life as a global community. Maybe it's time to put them down and to walk into some new territory together. Come Easter morn, that's a promise we'll all enter into together. Thanks for being a part of this evening. And as we close, I'll send you out in the darkness of this moment with that great benediction of old. As you move through these next few hours, closer and closer to the kind of the message of Easter, the challenge of keeping this body of love alive in our time, go with these words. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord always look upon you with favor and give you peace, the kind of peace that passes our human understanding, but invites us into a new way of imagining ourselves and the world in which we live. Amen, and good night.